Hey everyone! Before we open today's file, please make sure to follow us on Instagram at d.s.radio, where you can find all the images that go along with today's case. You can drop us an email at contact.dsradio@gmail.com. You can find all of our socials in the Linktree bio on our Instagram profile, including links to merch. If you're feeling especially generous, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/dystopian simulation radio, where you can get access to our exclusive Instagram page and make suggestions for upcoming episode topics that you would like us to cover. Speaking of Patreon, thanks to our Patreons, Riff Cult, Cropley Crab, Cash Broadus, Raspberry Jr., Jason R. Nelson, Creepy Paper, Jamie Sook, Michael Laughlin, Lindsay Keller, Mike Wright, Greer Weaver, Kelsey Carruthers, Linz Gibbon, Drake Holvig, Only Child, Michael M, Wesley Akers, Riaz K, Emily Medeiros, Pip, Heather Wynn, Graves, Devon Sweatshirt, The Ordained Sinister Minister, and Philip Hoffman. Hi everyone, this is Linz, just coming in real quick before the episode starts. I just wanted to give a shout out to Jeff Enton313 for designing our new X-Files style logo and artwork for Spotify. I also want to do a shout out to, and I'm probably butchering this, but Hans Krasem, spelled HANSKRAUSEM. We commissioned some artwork from them and illustrations to go along with the audio promo that we've just put out recently. We really love it. And last but not least, don't know how to pronounce this one either, but I think it's Madame JC, MADAMJC, for the most recent Eleonore Zugan artwork, which goes along with this episode. They do horror and nightmare style artwork, and you can commission all these people on Fiverr. Thank you very much to everyone who did artwork for us. We freaking love it. Yeah, if you need to commission something, head over to them and work with them. Really easy to work with. Thanks a lot. Enjoy the episode. Hi everybody and welcome to Dystopian Simulation Radio. I'm your host Linz.
And I'm your other host Chris. How you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. Felt like crap the last time you recorded and now I'm on the up.
Great. Good things. So
how are you going? I've got to ask back. It's just impolite if not.
True. I'm fine. I'm great because it's a Friday. It's the end of a week. It's all good when we're recording this.
So it is. So Chris, it's been a bit gloomy out recently.
It has. We had a recent storm where there was damage to houses all over the place. It snowed here in the UK, which is nuts.
I saw trees ripped in half and my neighbour's fence ripped off. I just looked out of the window and I was like, wow. It was just absolutely trash. And I was like, awesome.
There was a marked increase in UFO sightings during the storm, but they were actually just trampolines that were flying out of people's gardens.
Everyone in the UK has a trampoline in their back garden. Why? For some reason. I don't know. I think it was a trend and now everyone's stuck with them because they probably cost so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, when it's gloomy out, I like to consume literature that's more on the devilish side.
Okay.
So today, Chris, I have a story for you. The story of a very unfortunate little girl named Eleonore Zugan.
Okay.
So this little girl was a peasant girl from Romania who became known throughout London and Europe in the 1920s for a rather interesting reason. She was possessed by the devil.
Of course she was.
Of course she was. It's 1920s and it's Romania, probably possessed by the devil.
I mean, it's probably more common, like more people than not were possessed by the devil in 1920s Romania.
Yeah. She was born in a rural commune called Talpa in Romania on May 24th, 1913, she began experiencing strange happenings indicative of poltergeist activity around the age of 11. Around a year and a half before Eleonore's supernatural escapades made the headlines in the paranormal community, she was a regular little girl, but everything changed one day on a visit to grandmother's house.
Dun, dun, dun.
Doesn't it always?
Don't touch that cookie jar!
Well, you're not far off.
Right.
You're not far off. A kid was definitely denied some sweet treats in this story. Eleonore actually lived with her grandparents when she was younger, but they sent her home with the excuse that she was bewitched. So, Chris, if you could please read this in the voice of the famous Dr. Harry Price.
Okay, where's Harry Price from?
England.
Oh, what part of England?
I'm not sure. Probably London.
Few days after Eleanor...
Not that kind of London. Think spooky, refined investigator.
Few days after Eleanor's arrival, a shower of stones entered their cottage, smashing several windows. Then, in full sunlight, a big stone, a piece of porcelain, and half a brick also entered the house, breaking more windows. No one was seen to throw the missiles, which invariably fell at the child's feet. Then, observers saw an iron ring fall from a stove, and that, too, fell near Eleanor. Then, a small mug fell off the dresser. All of these phenomena being reminiscent of the Stockwell manifestations. The simple peasants thought that the girl was bewitched or possessed by the devil and sent her back home. Home once more, the Zugan family were having a meal in their kitchen when a stone from outside came crashing through the window pane. The stone was wet and round and similar to those found in the River Secret, a few yards from their cottage. A priest was called. He marked the stone with a cross and threw it back into the river. Then he returned to the house. A little later, the same stone, recognized by the priest's mark, was flung into the house again.
Thank you, Chris.
It's all right.
What do you think about that?
I think that sounds quite classist.
Oh, calling them all peasants.
The simple peasants.
Oh, they were very rude about the descriptions of Eleonore and her family throughout the entire investigation.
Well, that sounds like quite strange. Obviously, the fact that it's marked.
Yes, it sounds like a movie.
It does. It does sound like the opening of, like, The Exorcist or something like that.
Or the Conjuring movies or something like that. So as if these strange occurrences were not enough, things escalated to a whole new level around a year or so later. So Eleonore and her brother were walking to their grandma's house through the woods near their home when she noticed something shiny on the ground amongst the leaves. She kneeled down to inspect it and, to her delight, realized it was a silver coin. The girl's family never really had any money, so Eleonore was excited at the prospect of taking her treasure to the local sweet shop to buy candy. When she got to her grandmother's house, she could barely wait to show her the coin she'd found, and excitedly exclaimed her intentions for the loot. Her grandmother was not happy. In fact, she was quite the opposite. Eleonore was scolded and ordered by her grandma not to buy anything, yelling,
That coin does not belong to you, Eleanor!
Beautiful. So, like any child would be, Eleonore was upset and unwilling to part with her fortune. So to scare the child, the grandmother sternly bellowed,
If you spend that coin, may the devil haunt you.
She was upset about the argument that had broken out between her and her grandmother, but she was not deterred by the threat, and she spent the coin anyway. The remainder of the day went without incident. However, when night fell over Talpa and Eleonore undressed for bed, she felt a strange sensation. She turned to her mother and said the following words.
Mother, I feel a hand on my arm. It is cold and has long nails, and is scratching something on my skin.
Eleanor's mother did not take the comment seriously at first, but as she looked at the child's arm, the word Dracul manifested before her eyes in scratches and welts across Eleanor's skin. Dracul in Romanian is the word for devil. The smile was quickly wiped from her mother's face and she began to shriek, My daughter is possessed by the devil. Chris, thoughts?
That is quite a tale so far. It seems, again, very movie-like. It seems like that, first there's this stone incident and then there's, words appearing on this girl and she's now haunted herself by assuming a devil or some kind of demon Danzig or something.
So, Chris, when you think of poltergeist activity, what comes to mind?
Things being thrown around a house, kind of physical attacks on the residents of the house by being that cannot be seen and quite a malevolent presence. I don't know. I'm sure there might be a nice poltergeist out there that does like the housework for you.
I don't think
if there is, come on over. But
I don't think I've ever heard of a nice poltergeist.
No, there seem to be. I've heard of nice ghosts.
Yes,
like Casper, but not really poltergeists. The meaning tends to be associated with evil.
Yes, exactly. It's not, if you're haunted, it's not the kind of being that you want to be haunting you.
No.
Nobody wants a poltergeist. So can you think of any poltergeist cases, famous or, just something you've ever read about where you thought, hey, that seems convincing, that I believe that?
Not. There's always a shred of doubt in them, I think. I mean, the one that I was most convinced by, although I will say that there's some serious doubts, I know it's the Enfield poltergeist.
Yes.
Which, the photos of the girls hovering and levitating or jumping off the bed, whichever one you believe. But just the to me, that's the classic poltergeist case. I remember hearing about it as a kid. And that's what I think of as poltergeist. It's not something that I've looked into too much, to be honest.
So Eleonore could not go anywhere without all of the classic tropes of poltergeist presence in tow, like the ones you mentioned. Tables would flip, dishes would fly from cupboards, inanimate objects would come to life before her, and scratches would appear on her face and body. Word got around, and those in the commune wanted nothing to do with the girl. They isolated her out of fear and called her the devil child, behind closed doors and in hushed tones while gossiping about her around the village. Eleanor's mother brought in a local priest to perform an exorcism, but even he could not rid the child of what he believed was a demonic possession. Unwanted by even her own family, she was sent to an asylum, where she stayed to the displeasure of the workers and the other residents of the facility, who were disturbed and scared by the activity surrounding this devil child. She was locked away alone in a room.
Okay, so essentially she's disowned by her family, then by her village, then she's carted off to an institution to be locked away alone in a room. So
it's really terrible.
At this point, she's completely healed. She returns back to normal life, right?
Yes, and that's all. No, of course not. It obviously gets worse.
Yeah.
So she's locked alone in this asylum. Solitary confinement, really. Everyone's terrified of her. Superstition is rife. A German psychical researcher named Fritz Grunwald became interested in the case, and he travelled from Berlin to Romania to meet Eleonore. He tracked down her father, convinced her father to sign off to the girl's release so he could study her, and the father agreed. Grunwald did not experience any of the wildly talked about paranormal activity that was said to constantly happen around the child. Despite this, he decided that he would continue studying her. He died of a sudden heart attack several days later when he returned to Berlin.
Oh, okay. That's better than I thought what you were going to say.
What did you think I was going to say?
I thought you were going to say he was a diddler. And he was the devil.
Jesus Christ. No, fortunately he was not a diddler.
Okay, good.
Eleanor's story reached the ears of Countess Zoe Vasilko, an Austrian astrologer and parapsychologist and founder of the Austrian Society for Psychical Research. She took pity on the girl and offered to take her in. So, the experiences with the Countess. In the first 12 months of Eleanor's presence in the Countess home, she witnessed firsthand around 1,700 instances of poltergeist activity.
She was keeping a log.
She was, actually. This activity would take place in either the room the girl was in or the rooms next door or adjacent. So many valuable items got damaged during her stay there, and she was only allowed to reside in the domestic quarters and the hallways because of the expense of damage in the other rooms.
Wow.
The Countess reported the following: knocking on furniture, moving furniture, toys and other objects dropping from the air in various rooms, automatic writing at the hand of Eleanore, objects appearing and disappearing, oftentimes from locked rooms, pins and needles sticking out of Eleanor's skin, scratches and bite marks on Eleanor's skin, and she once heard a strange voice.
Okay. Did she experience any of the writing appearing on Eleanor's body?
Yes.
Oh, she did?
That was basically a really common one.
That's like classic.
Yes.
Right.
You mean like scratched in writing?
The
right?
scratch writing.
Yeah, exactly. So as you can see, it's the classic signs
Mm-hmm.
of poltergeist activity. It's what you always hear. So oftentimes when these things happened, Eleonore would be otherwise occupied. The Countess described one occasion where Eleonore was winding up a ball of wool with both hands, as the Countess and Dr. Harry Price, who had come over to study her, were watching on. And on the opposite wall, she claims a long dagger, which we can assume was some kind of showpiece hanging on the wall, suddenly seemed to get a will of its own, turned and pointed in their direction, and propelled itself across the room, embedding itself in the door where the Countess and Dr. Harry Price stood.
This is like straight out of a Hammer horror movie.
Mm-hmm. But this is Harry Price. A lot of people were investigating this girl. This case became really big, and a lot of people were investigating her. Not necessarily people who wanted to prove any kind of, supernatural entities or like paranormal forces. Just people who could not otherwise explain how these things were happening. Eleanor was terrified. She dropped the ball of wool and ran to the Countess. They watched the ball of wool disappear before their eyes. Just poof, gone. And later rediscovered it in a sewing box.
Wow.
They closed the lid and later found the wool sitting outside the box. So these things would be happening when Eleanor was otherwise occupied. Her hands were doing something else. Any ideas?
Well, obviously, it could be a poltergeist. That's the first option.
Yeah, okay.
The only other thing I could think of would be that the Countess was working with, or in collusion, or perhaps unbeknowingly with the Eleonore, that's it, and was kind of stoking the fires of this, and for whatever reason trying to, maybe she invites Dr. Harry Price over and is like, oh look, that ball of wool's just moved, and look, she's over there, and yoink, and so that's the only other explanation I can think of, unless of course she got her servants to do it or something along those lines. I've got no reason to think that, but if I'm hypothesizing. So
small trinkets and jewellery vanished and reappeared in the house, usually anything shiny and metal. They didn't reappear by just showing up elsewhere. The Countess said that these missing items would drop from the ceilings of rooms or slide down the walls of a room until they hit the floor.
Okay.
Strange, right?
Yeah.
Like, I've never heard of things manifesting. Like, normally you just find them somewhere else, but in this case they were claiming that they just drop from the ceiling.
Just out of the ether, just...
Yeah, just drop out, or like they'd see them sliding down the walls and then fall on the floor.
Crazy.
Yeah. Unfortunately, not all those shiny items disappeared and reappeared in a playful manner. There were occasions when the Countess would witness, with her own eyes, pins and needles jump from the sewing box, fly across the room, and embed themselves in Eleanor's face.
Yikes.
Pinhead style. She said...
Needles and pins.
Was that Joey Ramone?
It's supposed to be.
Okay. You just looked in pain. She said she once saw the child's face covered in needles protruding from the skin of her face.
Wow.
She
Hellraiser
kept a
style.
Yeah, exactly. She kept a log of these happenings and made as many as 67 entries in one day.
Wow.
This is how active this poltergeist, or whatever it was. So Eleanor was subjected to tests and observations. As we know, these phenomena occurred spontaneously, so those observing her attempted to induce the phenomena through techniques such as hypnosis, as well as less conventional controlled environments. So you'll see photos of Eleanor in a seance setting if you search for this story online. So by doing this, they were essentially attempting to remove any link between spirituality and science by proving that Eleanor's responses were due to stress and perhaps untreated mental health issues as opposed to demonic possession. Perhaps she had like psoriasis or some kind of autoimmune disease that affects the skin that could be aggravated by stress.
Doesn't normally make coins appear from the ceiling, but yeah, all right, let's run with that.
Exactly. They also proposed that these scratches, welts and rashes could be explained away as the physical symptoms of mental distress. For example, many people suffer rashes and hives when they're in highly stressful situations.
So basically what they're trying to propose is, before this was obviously a thing, she's Carrie.
Yes, I was just about to say. Another theory they put forward to explain the events surrounding little Eleanor is that she was experiencing some kind of Carrie-esque telekinetic mind powers.
Right, okay.
So Chris, I have a picture here, if you could describe it to the people.
So the first picture that I'm looking at is, I'm assuming this is Eleanor.
Yep.
And it's in a sideways portrait style, and she seems to have some quite deep scratches all around her face, so on her forehead, down her cheek, and I'm assuming these are some of the demonic sort of scratches that would appear on her body. It all seems to be bruising, or that this could be shadows, but it seems to be bruising beneath her chin, on her neck, back of her neck, and so on. And she generally doesn't look very happy. And then we've also got some pictures here of her hands, which seem to have welts on them, and on the palms or at least the palm of one of the hands, seems to have an almost kind of stigmata-esque blood splotch appear.
Exactly. People said that she also displayed signs of stigmata.
Ah.
Any ideas of how somebody could fake this if they wanted to?
Well, I mean, with the scratches on the face and the bruises on the face, I mean, if you were so inclined to either do it to yourself or get someone to do it to you, or somebody forcefully did it to you, you could probably do those with a razor blade or something sharp.
But keeping in mind that they would either be holding her hands in a seance style.
So these appeared during...
Apparently so.
Right,
they would
okay.
just appear on the skin.
I mean, the stigmata, conceivably, you could have something on your body, you press your hand against it, and then you've got blood on your palms.
Yeah, but I think this is an actual wound.
It's an actual wound.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, yeah, I suppose you could... If you've got a nail under the table, you could do that, or you could scratch away at it. But if somebody's holding your hands, I don't know of any condition where you could will scars to appear on yourself.
Yeah.
The only thing I can think of, and this is a real reach, would be if she had these scars anyway, but they only came to the surface, or they only became visible when she was stressed or something along those lines.
Oh, you mean like scar tissue when the room is cold and they kind of emboss on the skin?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's a thing, to be honest, but I'm just trying to reach for an explanation here for these scratches.
Apparently, her hands they'd give her something to do with her hands.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Cube, wasn't they?
and then if at the time if it existed, they probably would have gave us something like that. But like I said, balls of wool or winding up wool, fidget spin. I haven't thought about those in so long. But yeah, her hands were otherwise occupied. A lot of most of the time or all of the time, she was being watched by multiple people in a room. She would be sitting there. Like, how do you explain things coming in from the outside, like stones and rocks and...
Well, the only way you can explain something like that would be a third party or a second party, who's in on all of this. But this is quite elaborate to be done, and you'd think anybody who was going to be on this, it would be the parents.
And they would have to follow her to the Countess house.
And they weren't present at this time.
Exactly.
So...
They weren't there.
Either there's what you have to ask yourself, why? Why would somebody make this up? Why? I mean, the only thing I can think of is, she's a peasant girl and I suppose she's managed to get away into a noblewoman's property, but that can't have been the end goal here. That's she was picked out of an asylum for this. This wasn't clearly...
Yeah.
This wasn't a grand scheme.
I had a kind of similar theory to you on this, so I thought that maybe she had some kind of skin condition that was made worse by stress, or maybe the conditions that she lived in at the time when she was with her parents. Maybe she herself didn't understand what was happening and thought that she was possessed, and then everyone else around, if you put an old-time kind of Orthodox Christian spin on it, just agreed that, yeah, you're probably possessed. So superstition runs rampant and the kid ends up in isolation in an asylum. Suddenly a bunch of rich Europeans are interested in studying her because of her afflictions. She finds herself living with a rich countess, like you said, travelling around and decides to embellish it a bit or just perform a bit for the cameras.
Yeah, she's onto a good thing at a certain point, but she has to get to that point.
Exactly. Maybe it was maybe she believed it too. If you have a condition like that and the only education, for lack of a better word, you have is a religious one, you're not really studying or anything.
Yeah.
Then maybe that's your first thought and you say, oh God, I'm possessed by the devil. I feel something scratching me. And then, everyone around you sort of turns on you and attacks you and shit hits the fan. You end up in an asylum. And once you get that chance to get out, maybe you do play it up. I don't know. She also had bite marks.
Oh, where?
On her arms, on her neck, mostly her arms and hands.
Right.
Bite marks. So about the bite marks, the strangest part about them was that the dental imprint did not belong to Eleonore.
Was it a human dental imprint? Was it was it a dog? Was it something unexplainable? Was it Hitler? We've got his dental records.
So if you've heard our previous episodes, you will get all these references, don't worry. And if you haven't, go back and listen. But these bite marks, I assume, just by the reports, that they looked human because they went to the effort of comparing them to Eleanor's dental imprints. So these bites would have what appeared to be saliva around them. A swab was taken of this saliva or whatever liquid was on them and submitted. And they found microorganisms which they did not find in a swab that they took from Eleanor's mouth. There's doubt over whether it was actually saliva or not, but the substance had a high count of bacteria associated with staph infections.
Oh, okay. They're nasty.
Yeah, and they usually affect the skin. So could it be possible, like obviously you can get an infection from something with a lot of different or a lot of bacteria in it biting you, but is that an indication that she could have already had issues?
Maybe. I know staph infections, they are really bad, but they tend to be quite quick that they come on, I think. And you do get them from bacteria. I know, here I go to my regular old place, but I remember Stone Cold Steve Austin had one, and on his arm. I can't remember what event it was, but it was wrapped up like a Christmas present. It was huge out here.
When it swelled up like that?
They swell up, they fill up with liquid, and like they're serious. Like, I mean, you shouldn't have been wrestling with it. They're
definitely not.
Seriously fucking awful things.
So, since you actually know something, I don't have any experience with this. I don't know anyone who's ever had a staph infection, but they could swell up like welts and things.
They swell up like welts, but it's a serious swell. It's got a lot of liquid inside it. And if it pops and it gets reinfected with other stuff, it can be seriously bad, and you could lose that limb or whatever it is that you're doing. So,
or like blood poisoning and such.
Yeah, like that. The infections are really bad, and that's why if a wrestler gets a staph infection, it's like they need to get treated straight away.
Yeah, you should not be wrestling.
You shouldn't be doing anything. If you get a staph infection,
you should be staying home.
It's fucked up.
So, Chris, where's Eleonore now?
Dead.
Well, all of this activity stopped when Eleonore reached puberty.
Oh, interesting.
All activity, all scratches, all bites, everything just stopped when she reached puberty.
So what you're telling me is the devil's a diddler. Once she reached of age, he lost all interest in her.
You could be right. You could be right. She trained as a hairdresser, an apprenticeship that the Countess funded, and returned to Romania where she married. She died in 1998.
1998? We were alive then.
Yeah.
Shit.
So that is the story of Eleonore Zugan, the most possessed girl in the history of Romania.
All right, I like that you added that little bit, that the most possessed girl in the history
of Romania. Actually, it's one of the biggest possession cases.
Really?
Yeah, have you never heard of it?
I can't say I've ever heard of this one, but ghosts aren't necessarily something that I know a huge amount about,
yes.
So that might be why. So, what do you think? Do you think that this is a real example of a poltergeist or a possession or a...
I don't believe in, possession and demons. Well, okay, let's not get too deep into that, but at face value, I'm like, no, none of this is real, that's silly. But then again, like, if you can pull off convincing a lot of different people from a lot of different walks of life, like, you've got a countess, you've got, like, doctors, you've got all sorts of people standing in a room with this kid going, I do not know how this is happening. Like, if you can pull that off, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it is.
Now, the stories back in Romania, the priest scratching across on a rock, throwing it into a river, it coming back. I would say, okay, someone else is involved and they want this to be a thing. And, scratching a cross in a rock and throwing it back, that priest probably doesn't know the difference between his scratched cross and someone else. I mean, it's literally a cross.
Yeah.
I'm assuming he just went... And he did like...
Oh, right, like an X cross. I thought you meant like a...
No, that's what I mean, like a,
a crucifix.
Yeah, a crucifix. Everyone scratched a crucifix in a rock, it's probably going to look the same. So
yeah, probably. But
yeah.
When was the last time you scratched a crucifix in a rock?
Just last week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's not going to recognize the exact rock if it's the same shape and roughly the same size. So, okay, maybe they could have fooled people there if they wanted to. I mean, she had a brother. Maybe he was in on it. I don't know. But then she goes to live with the Countess. Then she goes to London. Then she goes to Berlin. She goes on a little tour with this, How can, unless she was doing this with the Countess, how?
Well, that's it, and excuse the dad joke, but the devil's in the details on this. And it's, it's easy to thrash around and start going, or whatever, Anybody can do that and pretend to be it, but when you start having things levitating or appearing, disappearing, things like that. The thing I would say is, obviously this is happening in 1920.
Yeah, the 1920s.
So technology isn't quite where it is today. It's unlikely that she had anything at her disposal to trick people, but at the same time, there wasn't the materials available that we have today to perhaps investigate this further. They didn't have infrared scanning. They didn't have cameras that could be rolling 24/7 on they couldn't do this in a controlled condition. We have to take the word of this countess.
They did do it in controlled environments to a degree. But Chris, I have some video footage. Obviously it's silent.
Oh.
And in German, but...
Silent but in German?
German text.
Oh, okay.
But you want to see Eleonore in action?
Go on then.
Here you go.
Okay, so I'm going to have a look. Ooh,
You might have to skip past the...
I was going to say, this is like 9 minutes long. I assume you don't want to commentate the whole thing.
No, but just to get an idea.
Okay, I'm having a look at some of this footage now, and we've got Eleonore here, who seems quite pleased with herself, turning her head back and forth. And is that the Countess?
Yes.
Yeah, so we've got the Countess as well, who's also turning her head back and forth. Okay.
So she's dressed in a little strapped vest.
Yeah.
So you can see the skin on her arms and neck and everything.
And as you have to say, this is quite, as you would imagine from the 1920s, it is quite poor quality footage. But we can see that there's an X scratched in, is that a chest?
Yes, I think so.
I mean, that's a real sort of welt that she's got there. She's showing off her different marks to the camera. You can't see too much in the far away images, but when it's close up, you can see that she does have some welts, some marks, some scratches on her body. She's now doing an amazing trick with a 1920s yo-yo.
She's occupying her hands in this clip, and they're waiting for things to happen in the room.
I see. Well, you know what they say about idle hands.
The devil's playground.
Exactly. Do you remember that movie?
Idle Hands.
Idle Hands.
It's great.
The offspring are in it.
Mm-hmm. Dexter Holland gets his scalp ripped off. Yep, this is a seance scene that we have here.
And they're
trying to show off some scratches on her face, but the lighting in these videos is very hard to get. So that's why they're turning a lot.
If you can't see this yourself, we will put all the links to this on our Instagram and everything else. But if you can't see this stuff, imagine very, very early black and white kind of Buster Keaton style movies. And she's, it's quite difficult to see what's going on. But even we can see here in this bad lighting, she's got big scratches all the way up and down her face.
Very big, long scratches across her face. And I think they're developing as they're sitting there and they're all holding her hands. And
now she's got a hammer. Is she occupying her hands again?
I would imagine so.
There's definitely welts that are
appearing on her back now. So she had most of the welts and the scratches appearing as she got a bit older.
Right.
Most of the activity around her stopped, the furniture moving, things disappearing and reappearing, and it was mostly just dominantly scratches and welts by the end, before it completely stopped.
Wow. And it's funny how it just stopped when she sort of reached, did you say it was when she became a teenager?
Yeah, well, she reached puberty. So basically becoming an adult, and then trained as a hairdresser, went back to Romania, married. The bewitched devil child just became regular Joe.
It's funny that, because as we know from film studies, that this is normally the opposite. So
exactly.
It's normally when a child reaches puberty that, the onset of womanhood began some sort of horrible demonic possession that can only be associated with the fact that she's finally got a period.
Yeah, you turn into a werewolf and start eating boys.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting. It's the opposite way round in this supposedly real life case.
Yeah, but this seems to be the case. If you think of a lot of possession cases, there do seem to be children. Like you said, the Enfield haunting, which was, in my opinion, two girls just jumping from one bed to the other in the dark while someone took pictures with a flash. I actually have a book at home, and Eleanor's case is mentioned in it, and on the next pages are big coloured photographs of the Enfield poltergeist case. And compared to this case, the Enfield haunting just seems really hilarious. It's just people in was it the 70s? Like a 1970s...
70s or early 80s, I'm not sure when, but just in an Enfield
some
housing estate.
Old school bedroom with really naff posters on the wall and two girls just jumping in the night.
I mean, the one thing in that case of it was there was demonic possession through voices and stuff that was recorded, which is the thing that's most interesting about that case. Those pictures do just look like some girls jumping up and down, as using a bed as a trampoline.
Evidence-wise, that's the worst. But the story of that is actually very creepy.
I mean, that's one thing that's interesting. It doesn't occur in this case is that there isn't any vocal possession or anything like that.
There was, the Countess said she heard a strange voice once.
Ah, okay.
Another thing that she said was when they were taking the train in England, from London to, I can't remember where they were going, but the Countess said outside of their specific compartment, she heard banging and scratching on the side of the window, and she said she was so terrified, it felt as if the devil himself had borrowed wings and was flying alongside them to stay with Eleonore.
Little did she know she was just going through North Shields. Get off the metro now!
But people were really convinced about this, and they still talk about it as one of the most convincing cases of demonic possession to this day.
Oh, I had no idea about this. I don't know if it's convinced me necessarily. I think
but it's a great story.
It's a great story. I think that footage, it's the opposite of the thing with the Enfield. Where it's The photographs at that point are like relatively high quality, so you can tell it's two girls jumping up and down the bed.
Yeah.
But with this, it's so poor quality that it leaves a lot of questions, and it's that whole, to go back to film studies, film theory again, what you don't see is scarier than what you do see, and little glimpses of Michael Myers is much more scary than when he takes his mask off and you're like, oh, it's a dude. And it's that same sort of thing here. You can't really make out exactly, and your mind starts running wild on things.
I just love the idea of a girl and her brother in 1920s Romania, like they're poor, it probably looks really grim and gloomy. They're walking through the forest and they find a silver coin, and that is some kind of like, a devil's trick. And the grandma tries to warn them and said, but you know what I didn't like about that? I felt as though her own grandma kind of cursed her.
Yeah. It's like,
if you spend that, may the devil haunt you or whatever.
Yeah, like that might have just been like a regular old coin until she threw a hex on it.
Now, I kind of feel like if I lived in that village, I'd be looking at the grandma like, this old lady has the power. Chris is just really theatrically copying me and being really sassy. But I would really suspect this grandma. I'd be like, maybe she's some kind of cabin witch because
cabin witch.
Yeah.
I mean, it's weird. I mean, obviously you've got like all these kind of tales around. I was expecting this to go slightly differently. I was expecting the tale to be kind of almost like the devil went down to Georgia type of thing, and there's going to be some sort of exchange, and my grandma was going to get something, but the child
that
was
would be a good
cursed,
fairy
and it would
tale.
be, something along those lines. But yeah, so that was interesting. I didn't know anything about that, so thank you very much for sharing that case with us today, Lindsay.
No worries.
So, we're going to be recording some more episodes in a few minutes' time, but you're not going to get to hear them for another couple of weeks. So, what we'll just say, everybody, is thank you very much for listening today.
Thank you. And if you want to see the pictures of Eleonore's, scars and welts and stigmata and whatnot, you can check them out on d.s.radio on Instagram.
All those lovely pictures and more can be found right there.
And all of our links are in the link tree in our profile.
Exactly. So thank you very much, and we hope you don't get possessed by the devil when you find a silver coin.
Or maybe you do get possessed and you call in, speak in tongues and such.
Go for it.
Yes. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.